This is PTV Volt. I am SYED SHABAHAT and you are watching Fault Lines. Today we are going to discuss two conflicts from Africa, both of which are causing serious losses, not only to the life but also to property and to overall peace of the region. The first and foremost case that is under discussion in today's program is the problem of South Sudan. According to some reports, rapes of women and killing of children is on rise in Sudan. United Nations had sent a delegation of experts in 2016 to South Sudan to witness the situation. And the report showed a very bleak picture of human rights violations, abuses and crimes against humanity. It was mentioned in the report that if the situation is not settled, it might just become another Rwanda, where 800,000 people were killed in absolute mutiny. Since 2013, 50,000 Sudanese have been killed in this conflict, and that is according to official reports, because we do not have any alternative means to countercheck that. 2.3 million people have been displaced and 700 schools have been destroyed. And despite all of this conflict has refused to stop. The country that took independence from Sudan, from North Sudan, now North Sudan, has taken independence in 2011. And the fight that's going on ever since has not stopped during the last 11 years. Is it an ethnic conflict? Or is it something far more than that? All of this in today's program. Team Fault Lines have prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
South Sudan gained independence from Sudan in 2011, but 2 years later descended into a spiral of brutal ethnic violence and revenge killings. In December 2013, UN Security Council authorized a rapid deployment of about 6,000 security forces, in addition to 7,600 peacekeepers already in the country, to aid in nation-building efforts. In May 2014, Security Council voted in a rare move to shift the mission's mandate from nation-building to civilian protection, authorizing UN troops to use force. A peace agreement was signed in 2018, but 9.4 million people required humanitarian aid, representing more than three-quarters of the population, according to UN figures. The UN Human Rights Council set up the Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan in 2016 to monitor rights and make recommendations on accountability. Investigators revealed that sexual abuse has been used as a weapon by all sides in South Sudan's civil conflict, which erupted in 2013 and triggered Africa's biggest refugee crisis since 1994 Rwandan genocide. Famine was declared in South Sudan in 2017, affecting 5 million people, and United Nations declared South Sudan's food crisis the worst in the world. Sporadic intercommunal violence, the threat of peace process unraveling, and dire humanitarian conditions across large swathes of South Sudan has placed renewed urgency on improving security and meeting basic protection needs for South Sudan's civilians.
Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about this very serious issue, I am again joined by Julius Beluto. He's a famous broadcast journalist based in the United Kingdom and is an expert of African affairs. Julius, welcome to the program.
It's always a pleasure.
Julius, started in 2011. This conflict has destroyed many lives. But the people in this part of the world need to understand, why did this divide take place to begin with?
The South Sudan, is part of what we used to know as Sudan, just as one country. But for so many years, there was sectarian violence between the north, predominant, occupied by Arabs, of course, Muslim religion embraced, but the south was also occupied predominantly by Christians. So sectarian violence for many years was the cause of the split, which caused the birth of the youngest nation, which today is South Sudan. Of course, he fought for so many years, and in 2011, that's when the breakaway happened, and that's when the birth of South Sudan happened.
So, Julius, do you believe this was originally a religious divide? Because most of the people of North Sudan are Muslims, and the South have different religion. Maybe most of them are Christians, as I've read. Or do you believe there were other reasons behind the scene?
It definitely had, because with the fighting, of course, the South Sudan felt kind of oppressed by the regime ruling from the north, and therefore the dimension through which it used to happen was on the religious basis, and therefore the Christians in the southern side of the country became extremely assertive and began, fighting back under the auspices of Sudanese Liberation, Sudanese SPLA, Sudanese Patriotic Liberation Army.
So all the ethnicities in southern Sudan fought together against the north, but later they became enemies to each other and started becoming parties into a conflict where these ethnicities were fighting to each other. Is that what you mean?
The thing is, when they were fighting to break away for secession, they were extremely united. There was no problem. Of course, we had the current people like Garang from the front of the army sides, and with people like Salva Kiir, and all of them were very much united, and it was like fighting a common enemy. They were united in the fight to secede, and that was before 2011 when it really happened.
Julius, help us to understand the ethnic divide of South Sudan. I have read that there are two major ethnicities fighting to each other, but there are many other ethnicities that are not in majority, but still they are a party to this conflict. Tell us more about it.
Yeah, there were communities, different ethnic background in South Sudan at the time, but it's fair to say they were all united when they were fighting for secession. Problems started when South Sudan after 2011, just after 2 years in 2013, then the ruling SPLA, there was conflict of amongst the leadership of it, and it was driven by power struggle within the party, and that what really caused problems, because conflict began, and it's now when it takes the dimension of ethnic backgrounds within South Sudan, specifically South Sudan, not North.
So, if we talk about South Sudan, in your opinion, is it more of a religious conflict or an ethnic tug of war? Or do you believe it is only because of purely political reasons that different sides are fighting to take an absolute control on power?
Let's put it this way. South Sudan is pretty rich. All the oil that was being exported by Sudanese country actually used to come from southern part of Sudan. So now as we are talking is in South Sudan. So we have resources as an issue of conflict, and also we have now political conflict as power struggle between now. When the war happened, now it's a question of course, now having the ethnic dimensions into the conflict, whereby it's a question of who wants to rule who, and the fighting has taken that particular angle of political struggle for dominance by people from this group and the other, and that's why they are fighting. So of course in 2018 with the peace agreement which had been brokered, and the two parties, of course, one led by Salva Kiir, the other one is deputy. They had agreed to it, but a couple of years down the line, there wasn't key focus on honoring that agreement of 2018, and therefore, as it is right now, it's been pretty horrible because the conflict is still going on and the killings are still happening, and the pronouncement or increment of ethnic conflict based violence has taken different shape.
So if I understand you correctly, you mean that this is an oil-driven conflict. And if that is the case, how big is the oil industry, and how different parties are contending to take control of these sites?
Let me correct that. I don't believe it's resources based. It's as in terms of oil as an issue, because oil is still not in the hands of any particular group. is still controlled by South Sudanese government. What I meant to say was, any regime that comes into power will always look at the resources and say, okay, I want to be in control of this country so I can control ABCD in terms of resources and make a lot of money. So I'm looking at it through that angle, whereby, yeah, why would they fight so much? Why would they be determined so much, each group involved in the conflict? Because they say, yeah, if we rule Sudan once, yeah, we have a lot of wealth as a country, maybe in the form of oil, or maybe the other extra things they are looking into, and therefore more determination to keep fighting until they overpower their rivals.
But Julius, as we read in one of the research papers published by Harvard University, there are 5 billion barrel reserves with South Sudan at the moment. Doesn't it become a point of attraction for many international players who might just be interested to explore this wealth?
There has been a lot of interest from the international community. I remember the last I heard was the involvement of Russia, but also the Chinese have been on the ground in a very big way. I'll never forget one time I interviewed one of the foreign ministers for China, and particularly at the time, it was a situation whereby China was selling arms to the regime in northern part of Sudan, in Khartoum, against the United Nations arms embargo. And at the same time, the same China doing that in northern Sudan. They were also now doing big business with South Sudan in terms of oil. So you're like, why are you doing this against United Nations embargo? Because the more you sell weapons, the more the war carries on. And they were like, no, don't worry, we don't care about your civil war. We care what we are doing business. We have guns. We need to sell to somebody. So oil, yes, is a question of willing seller, willing buyer. So kind of dismissing that in a way. So there's that dimension of international actors focused on resources. A lot of actually conflicts in Africa are very much alive today is purely based on international actor fueling the conflict to keep on harvesting the raw resources on the ground in African countries.
And Julius, in this case, are these players also trying to iron out the differences between the different sides so that in an absolute state of peace, they can abstract the oil, they can take the oil from there and can sell in the international markets?
The thing is, most of the time, um, crooked, or I just want to call them rock businessmen, or they thrive in crisis. Order isn't such a good thing for them. So, and when you come into African countries, especially the ones with a lot of raw resources on the ground, we've seen fueling of conflict because there's what the international actor want. You will not get it when there's peace, order and peace. Because then when people have peace and order, they are united. They can know when they are being exploited. They can challenge some situations. But if weak government, whereby one can be bought by international community and they'll have access, that is happening also on the ground in African countries.
Now, let's come back to the original topic that we essentially are discussing in today's program, and that is the sexual violence that has hit major headlines in international newspapers. Now, tell us, how serious is the problem of sexual violence taking place against the women of South Sudan?
It's always a two-way kind of looking at such a situation, because as we are speaking about the sexual violence, and of course some fingers for pointing at the government, what else others are calling the government to do something and stop it. It's very confusing to get accurate information. The government has denied any involvement in this kind of, or allowing this kind of form of violence to happen through its agent. Today, I mean, that's what the government of South Sudan has done. They've denied that no government official has been involved in that. But at the same time, when you look into international community, United Nations calling it out and condemning and asking the Southern Sudan government to do something about it, well, they say where there's smoke, there's fire. And Is it how much it is? How bigger is the problem? Now that one would depend on each particular media house. Western media sometimes, I may say, they come with their reporting sometimes decontextualized, whereby they don't know the histories of the place or anything, but they lump up things together. I'll give you an example. What I mean is, for example, talk about any conflict happening in a country in Africa, you see the Western media quickly labeling it, we're going to have another Rwanda case. No, you can't compare Rwanda with other countries because Rwanda has two tribes. Other countries, for example, like Sudan has more, Kenya has got 46, other countries may have about 100 tribes. So therefore, when you look into the dimensions, you can't classify people that easily. So the Western media sometimes also will do some bit of exaggeration because, of course, a lot of journalists from the West, they thrive in covering Africa. So that's how they make their names, which is pretty sad. So what else that is happening, we need to find out really what is the scale of it and who are the key players. What I've known most of the time during conflict, if it is tribal based, most of the time those soldiers fighting, sometimes they are the ones doing it, some of the time, because it's become a kind of a weapon, a war, which I never understand. I've done a lot of analysis and research. I never understand why will any man with a gun go that extra mile to feel like you're man enough, you're winning the campaign. If you're attacking the most vulnerable, you're not a soldier worth calling a soldier.
Julius, I'm sorry, but I could not comprehend. Are you trying to negate what has been reported by most of these international news agencies? Or are you saying that these numbers are barely exaggerated and we do not know what actually is happening on ground?
No, my exact position, it's happening. But what I'm saying is, sometimes you want to be careful how far you believe what you see. Could be exaggeration, could be fake news, but the real thing is what United Nations is calling out, asking the government of South Sudan to investigate and do something about it. But between you and me now, in a moment of a crisis like this, whereby the government is falling apart through this conflict, who is it? Who are you to call up to order? It's not easy, It's not easy. But I'm not saying it's not happening. No, I'm saying it's happening. But sometimes exaggerations could be not the best way to go.
Julius, you are of the view, as I understand you correctly, if I'm understanding you correctly, that these are exaggerated claims. But it's not only about the sexual violence that is taking place, it's also about hunger being used as a weapon of war. Now, is it, in your learned opinion, a use of hunger as weapon, or is it because of the fact that the entire region is under a dire economic and agricultural situation, and drought and famine have hit many parts of Africa, that is genuinely creating a situation where we have more mouths to feed and less food available for that?
What I know for truth, war is war. War being war, anything is possible, because if you're fighting with a group of people, you have no compassion on them, you don't care about them. Even in some cases, you wish them dead. And therefore, when we say food is being used as a weapon of war, we want to find out who is it doing that. It is the government. The government, of course, has been accused as well about that. And I also saw the government deny. I don't know whether the government is right or wrong to deny that, or is it just running away from taking responsibility to say that has happened? So we have two sides of that coin, whereby the government has been accused and the government is denying. So we are in a situation again whereby we cannot say with strength or without evidence that the government of South Sudan is guilty of using food as weapon, or we cannot say some groups of people are using it as weapon when they are also denying at the same time, because then we risk a situation whereby we may not get everything right. But as I say to you, always I believe where there's smoke, there's fire, and it can't just be people just making up stories, because sometimes I do believe, I also, as a journalist, I have faith in journalism whereby you can't just cook up a story. If you're a proper journalist, you do some research and some evidence and some facts, you get them. So I think, yeah, definitely it's a situation worth being investigated further, and to establish or go beyond the government's denial of it happening.
Julius, I fully understand, but just out of my journalistic curiosity, how journalism essentially is taking place in the conflict settings of South Sudan. I don't expect these media organizations sending their people in their branded vehicles with cameras and lights and everything. How can they just go and report in the conflict settings of a place as dangerous as South Sudan, where even the state doesn't claim to have control?
I just want to surprise you. Kenya, Nairobi, capital, is like the headquarters of global media. And a lot of stories we ever saw from Western correspondents of this and that, most of them are done by correspondents just on the ground in Nairobi, but doing some research on those countries. And therefore, I saw a joke, someone talking about how the world perceives Kenya, because when journalists is talking about Boko Haram in Nigeria, they end up signing up, or this is so and so from Nairobi. So people think that's Boko Haram is in Kenya. And it goes on and on. From Reuters to BBC to all these global media channels, AP, they have their headquarters in Nairobi. Their journalists, most of the time, they are lucky they go on the ground to those countries. Others will not make it, but they use their sources to do their stories from Nairobi. But to be fair, in terms of South Sudan, I'm sure there are journalists who can still access the country. It's not so badly off in terms of like a country that is zero tolerance to journalists from the West. No, they're still accessible. If I want to go to South Sudan, I'm able to go to South Sudan right now. But of course, you need to, if you're trained in operating as a journalist in hostile environment, you have to understand the dynamics of the conflict and know where to go and where to avoid.
Julius, how north of Sudan or northern Sudan would be looking into this quagmire that is developing in South Sudan? Do you believe there can be a spillover effect on the north if this problem continues, if it hasn't already taken place?
I tell you what, to be very honest, North Sudan is busy, too busy with his own issues to care about South. Why do I say so? I mean, we've seen the country with all the protest, the revolution happening. We've seen the former president al-Bashir, being kicked out of power. We have seen the military keeping on changing all the time, and denying people the right to choose a leader of their own. We've seen North Sudan is pretty busy. They have a very busy political calendar. I don't think they care what's happening in the South. I think if they were to speak, they are like, you demanded secession to be independent. Is that what independence looks like? You know what I mean? So from the northern perspective, they are like, you got independence, so why are you fighting? You understand? So it's like, you were united when you are fighting to be free. Now you are free. And now you are fighting each other.
I'm sorry, Julius. I need to repeat my question. I wanted to understand if North Sudan is apparently or genuinely worried about any spillover effect of this conflict, which might just send many militants inside their country.
Yeah, it did. It did. You're right. See, the thing is, Northern Sudan is still conflict going on. Southern Sudan still the same. And you're right. Most of the time, as we saw in the case of Somalia, terrorists like to take advantage of political instability. That's how they realize, okay, there's kind of a power vacuum somewhere, and it's easy for us to get in. And so there's that threat of terrorists, getting into either south or even north, which will not be really good, because, yeah, Somalia is not far from Sudan. It's still neighbor. So it just increases their operational base.
Julius, my last question. South Sudan rebel coalition on Saturday downplayed President Salva Kiir's carbon decision to withdraw from peace negotiations brokered by one of the Catholic associations that have ties with Vatican. Do you believe even the church has not been able to control the situation in a country where religion was one of the reasons of the divide that has taken place?
In a way, I've seen a lot of peace initiatives happen in Africa. They tend to succeed very well if you're a bit local and you understand the dynamics of the conflict. So it's very huge to see the father coming to, the Catholic priest of the Catholic Church doing something about it and also trying to broker more peace. But perhaps you see these things happen because when you are at war and you are on the negotiating tables, if in case you didn't see your demands being met, sometimes it's difficult to compromise. And I think also probably that's why Salva Kiir felt maybe there was not, whatever the agreements were, didn't actually solve the problems we were facing. But is he right or not wrong? I think a peace agreement is a peace agreement, and it's not the be all or end all. Sometimes it's the beginning of talks, which may get perfect solutions. So on that basis, I think it's wrong to pull out. He would have stayed and kept on campaigning whatever interest he wants to protect, bring them on the table until they are met. Pulling out is not a solution. It just makes the situation worse.
Thank you very much, Julius Beluto, for valuably contributing to our program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break and we'll join you back with second segment of program. Stay with us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The second topic that we are discussing in today's program is the issue of Somalia. Somalia is another hotbed of conflict where the state is fighting against a militant outfit, one of the most lethal militant outfits available or present in this part of Africa. Al Shabaab, that is apparently an Islamist extremist organization, is fighting with the state for an absolute control on power. Now, what has brought the issue back into fault lines this week is a fresh spree of attacks launched by the government forces against Al Shabaab, as a consequence of which, or as an outcome of which, Al Shabaab besieged another hotel in Mogadishu. And when the government forces came, there was an exchange of fire which caused 8 life losses. 60 civilians were rescued as a consequence, as an outcome of this operation. Somalian parliament that was going to be in session postponed both sessions of its sessions of both of its houses. Why Somalia has not been able to overcome the crisis so far? Why the government of Somalia looks standing alone in its fight against Al-Shabaab? And what is the future of Somalia amid the worst kind of drought that had hit this country once again? Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my guest to this part of my program.
The troubled Horn of Africa nation Somalia is embroiled in several challenges, including an increasing number of attacks from Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab group and a devastating drought that threatens to drive millions into famine. Fighters from Al-Shabaab armed groups attacked a hotel used by the government officials in Somali capital of Mogadishu, killing 8 civilians and 1 soldier during the siege. The assault underscores the continuing ability of the Al-Qaeda-allied group to stage deadly attacks, and the group stated that it was targeting the nearby presidential palace. Recently, 2 car bombs exploded at Somalia's education ministry next to a busy market intersection, killing at least 120 people. In August, 3 months after taking office, President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed pledged total war against al-Shabaab militants following an attack on another popular Mogadishu hotel, killing more than 20 people. Somalia government forces, supported by clan militias and periodically by African Union troops and United States air strikes, have made a number of battlefield gains in their offensive against al-Shabaab over the last 3 months. Somalia has endured conflict and clan battles with no strong central government since the fall of Mohammed Siad Barre in 1991. Somalia's international partners had repeatedly warned that political bickering is a dangerous distraction from the fight against al-Shabaab fighters who have been trying to overthrow the government for more than a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest in this part of program is once again Mr. Ahmed Zaki, one of my favorite experts on African affairs. And Ahmed Zaki, luckily, is from Somalia and has a very good insight of the subject. Zaki, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Ahmed Zaki, first things first. So let us understand why hotels are targeted every time by al-Shabaab. Is it something iconic in nature, or is there a strategic significance for these militants? Is there a strategic significance of these hotels for the militants?
Yeah, hotel targeting started after the weakening of the al-Shabaab, when al-Shabaab have been expelled 2011 from Mogadishu. They started targeting main gathering area, and mostly they are targeting hotels. So there are 2 or 3 dimensions that we can explain on the issue. On the dimension of the militant group, how they are justifying by attacking the hotels, it's that they are saying that it hosts the Somali officials. They are fighting against them, and international delegations, which they consider them that they are occupying their land without the permission of the Somali people. And they are fighting for against them on the name of jihad. That is the justification from the militant side. On the other side, we have the justification or explanation from the government side, which they are saying al-Shabaab is full of hate. They don't like the development of the people. The small progress after the civil war that Mogadishu made started from the new hotels that have been established. They are not agreeing with that, so they want Somalia to remain undeveloped country. That is the another side. On the third view, that which is the middle view or academic view, that we are seeing that al-Shabaab cannot go against the war in government face to face. So all they are using is that the guerrilla war, and the guerrilla war which they are using against the government is that they don't want to go for like less populated area or there where they cannot get attention of the media because they don't have independent media that they can spread their message.
But I'm sorry to cut you, Ahmed, but do you believe it is the weakness of the state that is allowing this militant outfit to thrive further? We have not seen al-Shabaab diluting its attacks ever since.
The main reason is that the government agencies, the government security agencies are extremely weak. Comparatively against the al-Shabaab, they are weaker than that. Their information sharing is not that up to the level that they can control the attack. Very attack, they cannot take any action unless the attack have happened. They develop somehow, but there are some other reasons which participates the lack of the security in Somalia, and that is that we don't have a national, unified national army across the country. So there are very small groups, and each province have their own separate army. They are protecting their own area. But the federal government military, which we should have to have hold the nation, that is extremely very weak, and it's limited to this specific area. And due to the lack of trust between the Somali functional political functions, they failed to arrange a Somali national army to take the responsibility of all security of the country.
Ahmed, I fully understand that in your learned view, in your opinion, it's weakness of the state, but there must be an international angle to this problem as well. There must be something that is helping facilitating this militant outfit in the conflict settings of Somalia?
Yes, there are international support, and there are what we call like militant in Somalia. They don't get only support from the abroad, but they also get even the guidance that you can understand that someone who's living deep down in the village where there's no communication, there's no any other facility, they can carry out a very sophisticated attacks with very professional training people from the military in the center of the capital city of Mogadishu. That shows that it's not only for the local people who are mostly joining the Al-Shabaab are illiterate people, and you can understand that the way they are taking the attack is extremely sophisticated and needs extensive knowledge of that. But that is very clear that everybody understands that there is an international involvement. How they are involvement, that is a dispute issue. But on the other hand, we can see that the neighboring countries also creating the problem for the Somali security. Ethiopia is involved, Kenya is involved. They don't want Somali government to get stability, honestly, because they will face the territorial dispute that had already existed between Ethiopia and Somalia and between Somalia and Kenya. So every country wants to keep Somalia in their neighboring country to remain fragile and weak state.
And apart from what you just said, Ahmed, maybe the strategic significance, the location of Somalia might just be another reason why there are so many international actors who are genuinely interested in Somalia.
And definitely, when we come out from the regional interests, there are international interests. For example, like major powers are now competing in the East African country like Somalia and Djibouti. And when you see that the Djibouti now become the hub of the international military bases that America have, Germany have, China have, even Iran have over there. So you can understand that outposts in military stations are already on the head of the Somali water territorium. And on the other hand, that because of the Chinese influence in the African countries, China needs a new route for their economic, for their expansion of the economic, like Belt and Road initiatives, like we have seen in Pakistan, the CBAC project. They want to also get a corridor from Somalia, but United States, they are against that. So eventually, what's happening is that there are competing interests inside Somalia, where the international community are supporting from one group to another group inside the political arena of Somali political parties.
Ahmed Zaki, since I have interviewed you quite several times, I fully understand that you are a critic, one of the major critics in my humble view of the role of peacekeeping in Africa. But still, in your learned opinion, how do you see the role of peacekeepers like United Nations and like African Union? How have they been playing in the conflict settings of Somalia? Have they not been able to help the government as much as they should have?
Unfortunately, the problem of the United Nations programs that they are carrying out on the ground, it's away from the reality, to be honest. Why it's away from the reality? They are taking information through a third-hand information. Like they are taking information from Kenya, they are taking information from Ethiopia. They are not asking the people who are on the ground, Somali people or Somali administrations, whether they are the federal or the local administrations. They are not considering even their suggestions, what they need and how they need for help. So whatever they are doing is carrying out a foreign agenda, which is not working for Somalis. That's where they are failing most of their programs. On the other hand, African Union, they send peacekeeping mission army, and this peacekeeping mission army, their mandatory is that to protect the government against the Al-Shabaab, not to attack them. Even if the Al-Shabaab is going to stay next door of the African Union, they will not attack them, they will not capture them, they will not put them in jail. They will just stop them when they start attacking them. And that you can understand how much limitations they have. Why they have this limitation is they even requested that they should have to carry out offensive. But even then, they don't want to take the risk of facing Al-Shabaab directly. Whenever there is an offensive campaign, it's the Somali armies who's facing the loss. It's the Somali army who's attacking the Al-Shabaab. It's the Somali army who's losing the life. And still, Somali army did not get direct support from UN, from African Union, from America, from any other country. All they have is that what they get from the local government and the local people.
But Ahmed, is it not? I'm sorry to cut you, but Ahmed, is it not what their theoretical role is? Just to stay as bystanders and to see if any one of these sides is not going to violate human rights? Or do you want them to become actually a party to conflict and be, partners of the government forces and to have an all-out war against the militant outfits? Is that how you want to see them?
And there are two categories of peacekeeping, as we know, in whole global, that you should, on the basis of the UN principle, one side is that you are mediating the local conflict. Like there are government and there rebellion. They are competing each other against the power. That we understood. But when we consider Al-Shabaab as an enemy of humanity, when we consider terrorists as an enemy of humanity, United Nations, they declare them as a terrorist organization. Global organizations, they accepted them that they are a terrorist. And Somali government, they accepted them that they are a terrorist. And they are not working any human agenda. They are going against humanity. There's no way that you should have to say, I will be the medium part between Al-Shabaab and government. There should have to be one side that you should have to take. Either you should have to support Al-Shabaab or you should have to go against the Al-Shabaab. That was the mandate, simple. But when they take mandate, they don't want to take the risk at all. They want to get the benefit from the UN, sit in Mogadishu, defend if attack come, especially when they feel that they can win. Otherwise, they should have to wait until the Somali army to lose against Al-Shabaab, which is not going to happen because Al-Shabaab is not going to go long time offensive. They are coming for short time offensive. They are taking like kidnapping for few people for few hours, taking hostage inside the hotels, attacking government offices, and they gun. There is no role for UN. There's no role for African Union. In this scenario, African Union army are sitting useless. And that is where we are requesting as Somali government officials, they are requesting, please give direct support to the government so that government should be able to purchase small weapons for the Somali army, to support their financial support, to give them good quality training, and so that they can compete against Al-Shabaab. This is where is the lack of understanding is going on.
Zaki, how is the public sentiment for Al-Shabaab? Because normally the militant organizations thrive on the sentiment of people. If public pulse is supportive, normally these organizations thrive. If public sentiment is against them, they do not have any sustainability. We have seen this in case of many organizations. How do you find the public sentiment with regards to Al-Shabaab?
President Hassan, he's quite like one of the luckiest president Somali government ever have. He came at a time that people start hating Al-Shabaab. Instead of fear, earlier they start loving them, they start supporting them. When Al-Shabaab get extremely powerful, they start oppressing the people. People start feeling afraid. The hate increases. Then when people start coming out from the fear and face Al-Shabaab without help of anyone, with local organizing themselves to protect their people against the Al-Shabaab offensive. That is when President Hassan came his second time as a Somali president. He got a chance that when locals are fighting directly without the help of government, directly fighting with Al-Shabaab. And he take the opportunity, he organized from the government side that they should have to go offensive against Al-Shabaab to clean it up. The problem is still here that we have, as I discussed it earlier in the interview, that the Somali army have not a proper support from international community. They don't have a proper weapon strategy. They don't have proper training. All they can do is that they can fight against the Al-Shabaab for a few days, and later on they will retreat and come back to their major places. Then Al-Shabaab will have no one to face, and again they will capture the land which they vacated by the Somali government. Here we don't have maintenance of the security. we can fight, we can win against Al-Shabaab, we cannot maintain the peace. Still, you can see that even though it has been eliminated, the southern and central part of Somalia, most of the major cities, most of the area which they have, because local people are fighting against them, but still they can be able to carry out like a current attack in major hotels in the capital city. So you can understand still their existence is available. Can the government of Somalia maintain the war? They can win against Al-Shabaab? That's unlikely in near future.
And are these militants getting some international supports from maybe various international stakeholders? Do you have any evidence of any major power supporting these militants?
The government of Somalia is fighting, what I can say, 90% all along. They have moral support, they have virtual support, they have but there is no touchable support from the international community, including peacekeeping mission army who are existing in Somalia. Their mandatory is that to protect government places, and daily Al-Shabaab is attacking the government places without the protection of the UN or African Union peacekeeping forces in Somalia. One thing they make secure, that Al-Shabaab cannot capture and hold for a long time in any place in the capital city. That's the progress that they made so far, the African Union Army in Somalia.
Ahmed, another thing that is affecting Somalia, when we read about Somalia in the international newspapers or the publications that have been made, we read about this drought. I've read that Somalia has missed 5 rain seasons in a go, and that has caused a tremendous amount of damage to the agriculture of the country. What do you know of it?
And this is a humanitarian crisis that due to the global warming, that the climate change affected Somalia extremely very harsh. And the way that it affects is that it affects from the major sources of Somali economy. The major source of Somali economy is the livestock. And whenever there is a lack of rain, the livestock is dying on the roads. And you can see when you go out from the major cities into the rural area in Somalia, where there is no rain for a long time, you will see the dead body of the animal is everywhere. That we have seen for the last 5 years consecutively because of the lack of water. But the water which we were expecting didn't come. On the other hand, it creates a lot of refugee movement inside internal displaced community who lost their animals and source of economy. They are migrating from one place to another place, especially they are migrating to the major cities of Somalia. And some of them, they are even migrating to the neighboring countries as international refugees. This also created another security crisis where Al-Shabaab is getting chance to recruit them easily. And on the other hand, we have seen the people who used to be having the animals, now they start going for the fishing. And that also increases the number of the piracy in Somalia. And these are interlinked points. Global issues come when either Al-Shabaab attacks one place or Somali pirates are hijacking one boat. They are not solving the root problems. They are not helping even Somalia to make a strategy.
So, if I comprehended you correctly, you're trying to say that this food crisis will keep staying in the heart of the overall conflict. And because of this food crisis, the conflict is going to rise further because of food shortage being one of the major problems.
Yes, that's what I mean. It will create always a chance that the militant group, those who want to remain Somalia fragile, they will always have a chance to recruit the hungry people, those who don't have proper education, their animals have been died. They didn't get help from government of Somalia, or none of the international community have came for their help. The only rescue they get and the guardian angel which they get will be the militant groups who are going to provide 2 times or 3 times a food a day.
Thank you very much, Ahmed Zaki, for being guest in our program.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was my last guest in this show. In both of the conflicts that we have seen, one thing is in common, and that is the weakening writ of the state. So the writ of the state has to be established. And the only mean to go for it is to strengthen the democratic institutions. The world that is fully focused toward the war of Ukraine and Russia should pay a bit of heed to the conflicts of Africa. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.